Hi! Today we're going to be working on this little table and we're going to be applying decoupage paper, and I'm going to show you how to make your own glaze, your own custom colored glaze, and how to apply it. First we're going to apply DIY paint in White Swan as a base for our decoupage paper. I go into a little bit more detail as to why I do this a little later in the video. Now we're going to apply the decoupage paper. I've chosen Roycycled Treasures in Industrial Masterboard as the paper I want to use, and I'm using DIY Paint's liquid patina, the clear liquid patina, as a decoupage medium. And just brush on a nice even coat and then apply your paper. When I'm applying a large sheet or an entire sheet like I am on this project, I work in smaller sections. It just makes it a lot easier to manage the paper than trying to apply the entire sheet at once. You'll never really get a completely wrinkle-free application of decoupage paper like this. You can get pretty darn close though, just using a balled up chunk of saran wrap to smooth out those wrinkles as you're applying the paper. The saran wrap helps ease the friction that you would normally have if you were just using your fingertips to smooth this out, and it works really, really well. Misting the paper with some water helps even out the stretch caused by the wetness of the decoupage medium. When the edges are dry compared to the part of the paper being applied, it can cause pulling, which can be kind of frustrating when you're trying to achieve a nice smooth finish. Now that it's all applied, I just grabbed another fresh chunk of saran wrap and I'm just smoothing it all out. You still need to be careful doing this because you can overdo it and you can still rip holes in your decoupage paper, which is super frustrating. I did it twice on this table before I achieved this one, so it happens to everybody. So don't be too hard on yourself, and the best thing is to practice on smaller projects first. Now this is the top coat using DIY Paint's liquid patina again. Remember, you're sandwiching your decoupage paper in between 2 layers of decoupage medium.
Okay, so that's on the top. And I am going to paint with Fusion Paint the skirt and the legs. And we're going to use Bayberry because this is a really nice, kind of a dark mossy green. So let's get going. Okay, so I'm just going to pour out a little bit of paint. This is a brand new pot of paint. And you don't want to dip your brush into your paint jar and paint your piece and keep dipping, because even if you clean your piece really well, you can contaminate your paint jar. So it's always best to pour out of this into another container. I'm not gonna lie, I don't always do that, but I try to. So I'm using a Klingon S30. This is a really old brush, probably one of my first Klingons I ever bought, so This is about 5 years old, and they're still my favorite. I use these brushes all the time. I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna do this little edge here later. But right now, because I haven't decided 100% what I want to put on that edge, for one thing. And the trick with Fusion for getting no brush strokes is to use a good quality paintbrush and to not be too thick with your paint. You're better off to do multiple coats to get your coverage than to apply your paint really thick. And you don't want to overbrush it too much either. It does dry pretty fast. I don't know if you can see, but that's a pretty good coverage. So I'm going to just continue painting this. Till it's all done. Okay, so I've got my sanding block and I'm going to just clean up this edge just by sanding away from the paper. You want to sand off your free edge and it gives you a nice clean line. Okay, so now that that edge is cleaned up, I am going to paint this edge in Fusion's Coal Black. It's going to tie in really good with the paper. After I just finished telling you not to use your paint right out of the jar, that's exactly what I'm going to do. This one's almost empty, so I'm not super concerned. So this is Coal Black. It is very, very black. And I'm just going to brush it on here. It's going to need 2 coats. Coal Black is one of the Fusion colors that is formulated with a clear base. So it requires usually more coats than the other colors. DIY paint or Fusion mineral paint does not have a black glaze, and I did not want a brown glaze on this. So I made my own using the clear liquid patina and Little Black Dress. DIY Paint's Little Black Dress. So all I did was mix it really well. It's mostly liquid patina and there's just a little bit of the paint for color. So I'm going to be using that to give this, grab my baby wipes handy, a little bit of a antique little bit of grunge, basically. So I'm just going to, where am I going to start? Let's start on this corner. So I'm just going to kind of rub it on here. Now this is the same technique if you've been following me for at least a minute. You'll know that I do this technique often using the Dark and Decrepit. And basically I just brush it on and then I come in with a scrunched up wet wipe and I kind of wipe it off. And if you accidentally take off too much, you can always add more. But what I do find when doing this technique is to, if you find that you want to add more here now, just let that dry. Let it dry completely, just a touch, and then you can come back and add more. If you try to add more to it now, you're basically just going to kind of just make a mess. It's not going to work. I find it just doesn't work right. So I'm just using a little wee bit on this. This is a really old paint pixie, a Frenchie. And like I beat it up pretty bad, so. And I'm just going all along this edge, kind of. I want to get this edge kind of taken care of, and then I'll probably go in here maybe and add a little bit of kind of visual texture here and there. And just work in small areas at a time. The patina, once it's dry, you can't reactivate it with water like you can with the paint. So just work in small areas and you won't run the risk of not being able to get it off. And I also usually try to get off this, any brush marks or anything on this free edge. I call it a free edge. I don't know what else to call it. First, because that softens it. And then you can go in and where you, oops, sorry about that. Where you've connected it to, if you remember, I painted this black yesterday, this edge. So it's okay if that goes to a fairly solid black on that edge. But I don't want there to be like black lines basically out here into the image. If any of that makes sense to you. So I'm just going to continue on and go all the way around, kind of creating that vignette appearance, that halo, and we'll see how that turns out. Another thing I should probably mention is there is another way of doing this, and you can underpaint beneath your decoupage paper. So I painted first the tabletop. I painted it white. I used DIY paint in White Swan. You can use any white or near white color. And the reason we paint white first under decoupage is to create that, so that image pops. I'm actually going to grab my sample of that so you can see what I mean. So this is a perfect example, and it's even the same paper. So see how, I guess this way, this side of the board, you can see this straight line right here. This side of the board was painted white. This side is this stain color underneath. So you can see the difference in how crisp your decoupage image shows up on white. So this is exactly the same. This is DIY Paint in White Swan, and this stain is DIY Paint's Dark and Decrepit. So that's the difference that you can achieve with your underpainting. Now what I mean by creating this halo effect underneath, another way is to do this first. You can paint your whole base white, and then you can go along and you can do your antiquing right on your white paint, and then apply your decoupage paper on top. The reason why, and that works perfectly fine, and it totally becomes personal preference on what you think, well, not necessarily what you think, but what works best for you. For me, I find it a lot easier to come on afterwards and do this than to do it first, because then I can work with the design on the paper. So like around the octopus, I can do a little bit more. Around this number here, I can add a little bit more. And if you're doing that underneath, you don't really have that same opportunity, because it's kind of hard to judge where everything's going to be. And though you can do your underpainting and then do this on top, there's nothing saying you can't do it that way. I just always do my basic underpainting and then do any antiquing or any visual texture that I'd like to apply. I come along and I do that after. That's just my personal preference on how to do this. Okay, so now that the top looks the way I want it to look, I'm going to seal it. And I'm going to use Fusion's Tough Coat. So this is the matte finish. So I have a damp sponge, and I'm just gonna pour some Tough Coat in a little saucer. And basically, you're just wiping it on. The trick with Tough Coat is to just apply thin coats with a damp sponge. And because everything's drying in here so fast today, I'm trying to move fairly quickly. And this is just a dollar store sponge. It might not be the greatest tool for the job. But it works. You want to make sure you don't have any bubbles. Okay, and I'm just gonna go around this edge, just in case there's any drips. And of course, to just seal that up so it matches the top. All right, so now we will let that dry and we will do a second coat.
Here's the second coat. I figured at this angle you guys can see how it's going on with the sponge. This is the best way to apply Tough Coat. It's fast and you don't get brush strokes, and it gives you a really nice, smooth finish.
So, products used: Fusion's Bayberry for the skirt and the legs. The edge of the top is done with Fusion's Coal Black. The top has Roycycled Treasures decoupage paper in industrial Masterboard. I love that paper. And I created my own black glaze using DIY Paints, a little black dress, and their clear patina, and sealed the whole top up with 2 coats of Fusion's Tough Coat in matte. I think it looks awesome.
Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions at all about this project or any other project, just pop your question in the comments and I will do my best to answer that for you.